Hello, welcome to another episode of Going Elliptic in our Charted series, where we really look at some of the technical analysis and charting of a few assets, some of which based on feedback from our audience. Now, this is not investment advice. I'm going to say it right up front. It is meant to be educational, and we really hope that you learn something from these videos. So if you do, please like, subscribe, and tune in for future episodes. Hey, Shanky.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Yep. Never a boring day in the markets, and even over this weekend, we've seen more all-time highs. So, plenty to look at and plenty to be excited about.
I think so too. Yeah, we are likely to see more of it, I think, over the next few days. Just the way that the price action has been, it seems to me like there'll be newer all-time highs that might be established for a few tokens for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, we're still in this tricky period. Some people are saying it's alt season starting. Some people are saying, hey, it's still in majors. So we're really going to look in today's session at a bit of both, because I don't think it's one or the other. What are some of the assets we're going to look at after the majors?
Yeah, so of course, like you said, after the majors, first we pick up the majors. That's sort of bread and butter. We got to look at what BTC is up to, and what's happening with ETH. And then we look at a bunch of, kind of serious alternatives to ETH. They come in various shapes, form, sizes, different promises. We saw the emergence of BNB through this bull run. So we'll go pick that up again and see where BNB is at. We'll also look at a newer competitor, but, a chain that is making a lot of noise, that's Solana. So we'll look at, what the SOL price tells us, right? What's the price action? What's the market structure looking like in terms of SOL price? And then we'll also look at a few others, a few others that I haven't talked about too much. They are very new, completely sort of new players in the market, but with immense amounts of cross-chain promise. So we look at RUNE, which is essentially the native token of ThorChain. And we look at FTM, which is the token for Phantom Chain. And both these are promising this new world of cross-chain without an intermediary, right? So I think we'll look at that. We'll see how those are playing out. And then, besides that, I think we'll also keep our eyes open. As we start seeing more of these in future, we'll keep bringing in these serious alternatives and start adding them to our list of ones to look at and, watch out for.
Excellent. And also following the show, we'll have a bit of a poll on our Twitter account as well for followers to kind of chime in on what are the alts that you're seeing as kind of serious contenders in this space, and how you're ranking those. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah, totally. In fact, we'd like to know how people are looking at it, right? Because we are using a little bit of our own, analysis hat, if you may. We'll have to see where the sentiment is. What does the community think about it?
Great. All right, let's jump into some charting.
Let's do it. We'll start with BTC. BTC has been sort of trading sideways for a while now, right? We saw that tried to break 60K very early on, almost now 2-3 months back, right? Back in February, didn't happen. Tried a few more times. In fact, there was a period in April when it did break through, but it seems like it was a fake out. It was not really like a proper breakout of that 60K range, or roughly that 60K range. And then from there, it saw a massive pullback, lots of correction. The price really went all the way down to, a little bit of 45,000 plus territory, 47,000, 48,000 territory. Touched that a couple of times, and now it sort of seems to be bouncing back a bit.
Still a lot of speculation whether that big pullback was somewhat due to minor issues or other market activity, but definitely it's hurt Bitcoin a lot more than a lot of the other assets that have continued their previous trends.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I think the narrative has been around 2 or 3 different things from what I've been also trying to just catch from the the Twitterverse, if you may. and just the online conversations and forum conversations. One, of course, is yes, the whole miner story that we discussed in a previous episode. The second one, there's also sentiment that sell-off by some big players like Tesla and others may have triggered some of this because those were large volume trades. There's also a third school of thought that, since it wasn't breaking through 60,000, a bunch of retail investors wanted to basically lock in some profits, and so they sold, right? And my theory is that I think there is obviously maybe an element of truth on all of them, right? Maybe all of them played a part. But there might also be a fourth theory that I'd like to add to this, which is essentially reallocation of capital. So what we see in crypto over and over again is that usually there is some resurgence of new capital that comes in. And then there is also a fair amount of shuffling of things in the portfolio, right? The people who are already trading crypto, people who are already in the world of crypto, they tend to move things around, right? Depending on what's moving more. And not just logical, right? Especially the traders, not the ones who are long-term, thesis-based hodlers, but, a lot of traders. And traders are a big bunch, I think, in this community.
Yeah, and maybe you don't hear their voice as much on crypto Twitter, right? They're actually doing this type of analysis day in, day out, and just going with where the indicators are taking them rather than the rest of the community sentiment, if you like.
Oh, totally. In fact, if you ask me, just trying to dig into that second level of detail and just look at the markets, look at the data, and also speak to a lot of people, crypto Twitter is by no means an accurate representation of the crypto world or the crypto trading world. It was till some point in time when the volumes were smaller and some of these individuals were in fact the most impactful players. But with the broadening of the base and institutions, and when I say institutions, I don't even mean traditional institutions, but just crypto institutions coming into play, there is a lot going on. There is a lot more going on, and some of it is also opaque. It's difficult to kind of gauge how exactly are they playing out. They're playing the markets in a smart way. They're there to make money. They're there to hedge their bets, and they're there to find the right opportunities. So they aren't necessarily making the biggest amounts of noise or necessarily doing things even in a manual way, trying to find the price points. They just have these automated systems which is finding opportunity and arbitrage and continuing to play the markets. That's just a reality.
Yeah, so that also lends some credence to your kind of observation there that it could just be a reallocation of capital, or that could be another factor. And is it potentially that they're reallocating capital across to Ethereum?
Very likely, yeah. So let's go back to the charts and look at BTC a little bit, and I think we should also look at Ethereum, and then of course the comparison between ETH and BTC, right? So I think we should look at all three of those. If you look at BTC, I think there are 2 or 3 things worth looking at. I would keep a very keen eye on this, the same sort of resistance that has been built up around the 60,000 value, and see what happens to that over the next few days. If it does linger around there and keeps moving sideways for a long time, I think the price could really move either way. I know that the broader belief is, hey, we are in this big sort of super cycle, and the price is going to hit $1 million, or maybe at least 100,000 to start with, that kind of price point. But realistically speaking, I think if we see a lot of sideways movement for a continued period of time, it may also be possible that there is much sharper correction, and then perhaps those kinds of price points are reached only in the next cycle, whenever that next cycle comes. So I think I would watch 60,000 with very keen eyes. I would just sort of watch that closely, and not only just breaking from 60,000, but just see how does the price behave right in and around it.
Right.
If you see another fake out, well, it doesn't really mean anything, right? But if you see a change of trend and a very strong trend forming again, then I think we will probably see the next leg of the run, if you may. So that's the key thing, kind of, to keep your eye on BTC. Other than that, small day traders might still find a lot of opportunities. It's become obviously a little more range bound, but the moves are still pretty decent. I would just
those candles are looking pretty long.
Exactly, yeah. So if you were to just look at average true range on the daily charts, That's still telling us $3,000 worth, $3,200 worth of movement daily. That's plenty for traders to get, some swing trades in, right?
Absolutely.
So exactly, yeah. So I think they might still be there, the price agnostic traders who are going to sort of trade either way, right? Long or short, depending on the opportunity and finding the right entry and exit points. Still have plenty of money to make out here in the BTC world because the liquidity is good. There are a bunch of people who trade there, and you can perhaps move in and out of trades more easily in this asset than many other assets in the crypto world, where if you have a large position and you start moving out very rapidly or moving in very rapidly, you'd impact the price with it, right? With those moves.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at ETH. ETH has been the favorite really over the last few days, and as has happened in last two sessions, right, Paul, where we had to go back and replot our fibs because this one keeps going up.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's keeping on trend, and in fact, that distance between the 20 EMA and even the closing or lows of the candles are is only growing bigger there. So that's very interesting to see.
Yeah, truly. And in fact, we have seen in the past, if you just go back a little bit from, this is January of this year, the beginning of this year, we did see a lot of positive movement, but we also saw a lot of healthy pullbacks, right? And in some sense, the ETH price was hovering around the EMA 20. There was a period in Feb when it pulled back a little further and even tested EMA 50, which is kind of a medium trend, not a super strong trend, but then it kind of moved back up, was a little range bound. But now you see a very pronounced bullish move up, right? Come April, and it's very evident that we have seen some very big green candles just keeping the price up, and up. And there were numerous all-time highs that were established. In fact, on a weekly basis, we kept on saying, newer all-time highs, bigger and bigger all-time highs. So
yeah, and I mean, we're only a few dollars away from 3K for Ethereum on USD there. Do you expect to see that based on the trend? Is it going to happen this week?
Oh, totally, 100%. In fact, I think that's a no-brainer. I mean, when will it happen? It's hard to tell. There might be a little bit of pullback, right? Again, never say never. I mean, that's something we want to always emphasize. Nothing is sure in the markets, but I think if you just look at the charts, it does seem like it's going to touch 3,000. The momentum is there, the interest is there, the price action is there. Let's maybe look at RSI to see how much of buying momentum is supporting that narrative. So just go with the standard sort of RSI showing overbought, oversold price points. Certainly it's an overbought range at the moment, right? It's above the 70 mark, and that's not surprising at all, right? The price has just been surging up. In fact, if you go back, the interesting part here is not so much in terms of these turning points in RSI, but the fact that it has been a healthy buying territory or buying momentum since the beginning of the year. We just haven't seen a single point of oversold range. There's been some pullback, right? Like sort of times when people haven't bought as much, or there's been a little bit of selling and correction, as we saw back here in, I think, February. But for the most part, it has stayed up top, above the 50-60 range, and multiple times has touched or broken through the overbought range. So yeah, there might be a little bit of pullback, but surely it looks like it would reach 3,000, maybe more. Is that like double the amount of what we saw in 2017? What was the all-time high in 2017? 1,500 or 1,400 or something to that range, right? Just jog my memory, remind me. Yeah.
Yep. So we are going over double now from
double,
the
right?
all-time high. Yep.
There you go. So yeah, that's interesting. Let's just go back here and see. I think this is 2017. This is the high we reached, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 1,450-ish, 1,428 or something, right? Like something in that range. And 3,000 is a very clear double of that, right? And what did we see in BTC so far? I think BTC went all the way up to 20K in that last bull run. And of course, right now it's hovering around 60, unable to break it, but still sort of, hovering around that. So that's 3x, right, compared to the last high.
Yeah, and it's always interesting in that relative value. So yeah, from a dollar terms, Bitcoin has outperformed Ethereum in terms of its ability to reach new all-time highs. But if we actually look at the direct ratio of ETH to BTC, I think that itself is also at an all-time high in terms of ETH's value to Bitcoin.
That's correct. Yeah, and let's look at that. So, again, if we even take that same run-up that BTC's had, one could guess that, assuming that the same plays out for ETH, you can certainly see a 3x on ETH since the last all-time high, which means in the range of like 4,500 or so, right? Like, it's a likelihood. We don't know whether it will happen or not, but it's definitely a likelihood. So look at relative movement. It's very clear. There's no ambiguity here, since March end and pretty much through this month, ETH is totally sort of dominant as compared to the ETH to BTC puzzle. It's a very sharp sort of trend where ETH has relatively grown way faster. Price action has been in favor of ETH as compared to BTC.
Yeah, and this, I think also does support a little bit of that capital reallocation when people are looking at the fundamentals and even the technical analysis of both Bitcoin and Ethereum. They're going to allocate capital to one with the performance, and I think that's being reflected here in this relative ratio.
100%. Yeah, that's totally true. And also now, influencers are talking about it. In fact, the last episode or the last couple of episodes of Up Only TV, where Crypto Cobain is a very common name in the sort of cryptoverse, and he has been very vocal about it. I think he's been saying it quite loudly, saying he's sold all his BTC. In fact, that's the claim he's making, and he's moved everything to these alternatives, including ETH, which he's hyper bullish on. There is another episode which was quite interesting and quite recommended to also listen to. It was the last one of Uncommon Core, which I think Hasu and Sue, the Three Arrows guys, run it, and they had Crypto Cobain on the show. So it was interesting. The three of them kind of chatted last one, and I got a chance to catch some parts of it. It was a long show. It was like over an hour long, but I got the key parts, if you may, basis what I was seeing online. And in the interesting piece was that they were all hyper bullish on ETH. And in fact, if I heard correctly and if I remember correctly, Suzu of Three Arrows made this claim that they are probably the largest holders of ETH in the world. That's the claim that he made in the show.
Interesting.
Which was interesting, right? And he
truly outside of exchanges or that, but as a fund, I would lead some credence towards that. I mean, they've been accumulating for a very long time.
Correct. So that was his story, right? And in fact, he made another very good point, which is worth of sharing. I'm repeating what he said, but the reason I'm repeating is I really liked his line of thought, and it kind of agreed a lot with my own line of thinking. Is that if you go back year and a half, 2 years, there was an element of doubt on ETH's future, and people were even questioning whether ETH2 is required. It's been delayed. Why don't we just go to ETH 1.5? There was just a lot of sort of doubt around ETH and ETH's future. And of course, we also saw price action, right? A couple of years back, it had dipped all the way down. It was barely even in that, $100 range, even less. I think it touched almost all the way far down to like 70 or 80 bucks, And so it was saying like from there, we have really turned the page. And last few months, I think there is not only bullishness around ETH, but around DeFi, which has been, ETH has been the primary platform around it, around the fact that ETH 2.0 is becoming more real, around EIP 1559, around all these sort of layer 2 scaling solutions that have made a lot of progress over the last few months. And then over and above that, also the sort of broader crypto community thinking more POS as opposed to POW, right? And I think that, again, the specifics, one should go to that and listen to what he's saying. But, in my own thought and my own words, I think the conversation around consensus of, hey, POW consensus is the right one. It's the purest one. It's the kosher one. Doesn't hold anymore. I think that what people are now coming around to is like, great, POW is great. We like it. Proof of work has proved for a long periods of time, and sure, it has its downsides and larger consumption, but POS, if run properly and designed properly, is a beautiful consensus mechanism, right? And with ETH 2.0's POS and staking and everything that's being discussed quite openly, I think there is a lot of enthusiasm around it. There's a lot of buy-in from the community around it, and people are looking forward to stake on ETH 2.0 and be participants in that POS chain.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting when you think of, kind of global currency reserves and things. Most countries hold other countries' assets in relative measures, whether that's for their own trade or just to back their own currencies. And I do see in this ecosystem of proof of work and proof of stake that, there should be both. But it doesn't mean that it's exclusionary, one or the other. Actually, a mix of both is going to be the best. And especially as we now start to, as you mentioned, the layer twos on top, they don't need to follow the same kind of consensus algorithms either. So, we're going to see, I think, quite an expansionary process there as some of these alternatives really pick up the amount of value that is locked on their networks on top of Ethereum and alongside Bitcoin.
I think so. And I think DeFi continues to grow. So that's another spectrum of just traditional finance being challenged by DeFi, and therefore that's sort of causing the positive impact across chains that support DeFi, right? I mean, we saw that obviously on Ethereum, but also we'll see that as we study, and we have studied that, BNB and perhaps other ones as well, right? Like every challenger, every serious alternative is also going to piggyback on the DeFi narrative. So that's another piece we'll see.
Yeah, let's jump into a few of those as well. See from a charting perspective how those narratives are playing out. BNB is obviously one we've covered several weeks in a row now in the charted series, because it's still continuing to try to break out, and as BTC VIX predicted 2 weeks back, maybe flip ETH. It's looking much less likely now, isn't it, Shanky?
Never say never, but yes, it's at least from the current market structure, it does look a little less likely, BTC VIX's prediction. And also, I must say, the flipping conversations are interesting. There was that bit where there was, hey, BNB is going to flip ETH. And these days, in fact, I think there's a lot of conversation that ETH is going to flip BTC. So never a dull moment. There's always some flipping conversation somewhere or the other. So I think that's what's going on. Let's look at BNB very quickly. We have spent a lot of time on this, as you rightly mentioned. I think BNB is definitely a serious contender, especially with their BSC chain, the smart chain, and applications like Cake and others getting a ton of activity, ton of adoption. I think there is some serious activity going on here, and BNB is one of them which has really played well and used the DeFi story to its, or DeFi narrative to its advantage. They've really done good innovation around that, and they continue to do so.
And I'd still say compared to last bull run, with things like EOS or Tron, they really didn't capture that DeFi narrative and have the actual liquidity of new assets on their chains to make a serious challenge to Ethereum. Whereas that's what BNB's really nailed. They've got liquidity. Obviously, having Binance as a backer is helping, but there is ability to do DeFi on BNB, or Binance Smart Chain.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I think, the other part that people sometimes discount is if you look at EOS, for example, I think EOS for a long time tried to completely build the alternative dev tooling as compared to ETH, right? It was not even compliant with the kind of smart contracts that you could write on ETH. And then, of course, it had its own adoption challenges because people did not want to learn a new tool. There is always friction when you have a completely new tool and a new methodology to be learned. And then there were some like Tron, which copied Ethereum as is. They were like literally an Ethereum fork, and everything that was there within the ecosystem looked and felt like Ethereum. They were literally copies of everything. But what they did not really figure out, in my opinion, was really the usable and interesting applications on that platform. They just built that same chain, but then it sort of stopped there. And sure, there were some casino apps and a few other things, and Tether moved some of it. which in my opinion has kept them alive, that are moving there. Otherwise, there isn't really much traction on chains like Tron.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the difference with Binance is, I think Binance really knows, at least has learned quite well in terms of what to give to the users. They really understand the crypto user well from their own experiences in the centralized world, having run and continuing to run one of the very successful centralized exchanges. And I think that they really worked hard to bring on workable models, models that could be useful apps where people could come and do some, interesting yield farming or do some, interesting activities. And I think that really, in my mind, has made the difference. It's not so much like, oh, I've got a faster chain, but it's like, yeah, I can go to Cake and I can go and get some high yields in there at a, in a fast way, and then I don't even have to do anything new, right? Like if I'm a builder, I could just write my same smart contract and deploy it there. If I'm a user, I can still use my good old MetaMask, and all I have to do is just switch the chain from Ethereum, whatever mainnet, to Binance mainnet, and I'm all set, right? So I think like that has really been the big winning point, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think still the downside, which is often discussed, is the fact that, yeah, it is hugely centralized. So it's proof of stake, but not in the same way potentially as many of the other proof of stake chains, or definitely not as decentralized as ETH2 is going to be. So yeah, it gives them some advantage in this early stages, but I think it's giving them still some scaling challenges and some risk to kind of lose that position over time.
Oh, surely. Yeah. I think see, at the end of the day, decentralization is going to play a big part in this whole story, right? In the long run, DeFi, sort of the decentralized finance, right, as the name itself suggests, and decentralization is a cornerstone of this entire spectrum of things, right? So I think that definitely will remain true. But I also feel that I think in a bull market, people are more forgiving. As far as people are making money and getting big yields,
Yeah.
I think the conversations around custody and decentralization certainly fades away. But of course, if there's a big hack and they lose money, or if the market turns bearish, that's when I think those conversations bubble up top again, right? And people talk about self-sovereignty and custodial and decentralization. Hey, this one has 8 nodes versus 21 in the other one versus 300 in the other. All those conversations suddenly become more important. We honestly haven't seen much of that lately, right? Like, some have questions like, oh, this is centralized, and yeah, they're slow and they copied it. And we've also seen, people who were copied from kind of being sarcastic and mocking them. But honestly, the users haven't cared. The users have really not cared at all, right? Like we've seen all these times when the Uniswap founder Hayden's coming and kind of making fun of the Cake guys, but you know what? There's
Yep.
still more users going to Cake because they're earning the yields, and perhaps they're aware of it. They understand it, but they don't care. It's not a criteria, not a priority at this point in time. But sure, yeah, if the yields start sort of dropping, or the market turns, then maybe those will become more important. So it'll be good for Binance and BNB and applications like Cake on Binance to kind of start thinking up ahead a little bit and figure out what that story is going to look like in terms of decentralization.
Well, I think definitely, I mean, at the moment they've got the bridge back to Ethereum, so there are some simple assets that can flow between both Ethereum and Smart Chain. But I think the next step has to be bridges out into other chains to be part of that kind of web or network of liquidity across DeFi, whichever chain it might be on. And I guess that's where, RUNE is really making its big play, is trying to be that liquidity pool across any chain, and in a very kind of decentralized community, project-led kind of way. There's no exchange or company behind their development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. I think RUNE is, in some sense, in my opinion, quite path-breaking. Very greenfield way of looking at the space again. So if you start thinking about the challenges, right? If you start thinking in terms of alts, I think the original idea was steal away traffic. I think that's how it kind of started originally. Like, hey, if ETH can do it, we can do better. I'm going to take all the users with me, right?
Yep.
We've got a question there, I think. Rune thoughts, gentlemen. Okay.
Yeah, which we're diving into.
Perfect. Yeah. So we'll touch upon that, and hopefully we'll answer the question. And again, the listener, if you have more questions as we finish through this segment, we will wait a few seconds, and we'll be happy to answer those as well. So I think coming back to the point that I was trying to make is that was the first run where people were, let's steal the audience, let's get all these people who are trying to do activity on ETH and bring that to our chain. That's where all these EOS, Trons, etc. were born. And I would claim even the likes of Cardano and others were on the same boat, where the idea was, okay, we'll just kill ETH and we'll take over the traffic. Somehow that sentiment has changed over a period of time. I don't think people care that much around necessarily moving everybody over. And that's when we start seeing also all these different kind of chains that start bridging with Ethereum, where the idea was, okay, you know what, Ethereum's fine. There's a ton of developers on Ethereum, and it's a great network, but it's got its problems, right? It's got its problems around scaling. It's got its problems around costs. And so I will give you an alternative, and hey, why don't you bridge with me, right? And we saw a lot of these bridging type of protocols come up. And I think people responded well to it. People liked it, right? And then, of course, you've got chains like BNB, which brought the whole infrastructure, but also they have a bridging concept there. They have all these bridges and swap gateway established where you can move back and forth between the chains. They aren't saying necessarily, hey, you should just completely forget about ETH and just come to BSC. That's not what they're saying. In fact, they're also saying, well, come to BSC. You can bring in everything that you have, down here. Now, if you think about it, the other part of the puzzle is that there were chains like, the whole Cosmos chain, which emerged, which really started doing in terms of cross-chain, right? But the problem with Cosmos, in sort of a nutshell, again, that's a much longer conversation, so we'll try to avoid that for now. But I think it was just more complex. It was not straightforward, right? And I'm just saying that a little more loosely, but the fact was great technology, great stuff, but just complexity around it from an end user standpoint was a little more difficult. And so where RUNE is coming in, where you've got all these phantoms coming in, is really that why don't we look at just bridging multiple chains and all the chains, all possible chains. So therefore you can hold your assets on the Bitcoin chain, or you can hold your assets on the Ethereum chain, or any others for that matter, but you could just trade between chains, right? It's like the inter-blockchain type of the universe, right? That gets realized, and it gets realized in a decentralized way. It gets realized in a way where all the same things that you can do on one single chain can be established in this cross-chain manner. I think it's fantastic. I think it's lovely, because this whole idea is both very fresh, but also very promising, because if they're able to realize fast transactions and they're able to realize the same experiences, you will see people wanting to do that, right? I think that people have done a lot of wrap tokens, and while it works, it has its complexities. And what you're really saying is, you don't need to do this wrapping. The whole wrapping business seems unnecessary. You can just bring your native token and come and just trade it, right? And so I like it. I think I'm very bullish on these types of chains. RUNE, I think, is excellent. I just feel like RUNE is a excellent story. It's still new. It's still a lot needs to play out there. So it's a very young token, and it's a very young tokenomics and a young network. But I think the promise is immense. There's absolutely no two ways on that. I personally played out a little bit with that, the Asgard exchange. I don't know, did you try that, Paul? The Asgard DEX that they have set up on RUNE?
Yes, I've tried that a little bit, and it's a very familiar experience, and I think it also adds to what we saw from DeFi in 2020, especially the yield farming kind of aspect and the swap growth that we saw over the last 12, 18 months is very much playing into the favor of RUNE, right? People like simplicity, and they just want to go to a nice UI and swap between two assets. And that is exactly what RUNE is solving for, and they're doing it really well.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, what I would like to see, though, is I think they should probably spend a little more energy. And when I say they, I think it's the applications on RUNE, things like Asgard and others, that should spend a little more energy on usability, right? So if they start becoming pretty much like BSC, where you don't have to make any extra effort, I think they are definitely going to see more adoption. There's no two ways on that. Let me come back to the token a little bit and just see what the token's doing, right? We have spoken about a lot of background, but let's look at the token. It was hovering around $1, right? For a long time. I think it was like right here for the most part since it was born. I think one of the big concerns with many of these promising new projects is like, will it even see the light of the day? Will they publish something, right? Will they even release? And that changed in March, right, Paul? That's when they launched, I think, their initial network, right?
End of March.
End of March, exactly. And it times beautifully with that piece. And from there on, the price has just gone up parabolic, right? There's no two ways on that. From about $4 or $5 price range, it has gone all the way up to, I think it's touched about $17, and then has largely been bullish. We did see this big pullback, right? This period where it came back all the way down to about $10. It pulled back almost, I would say, 70% of its value, right, in those 5-6 days. My sense
Does
is
that look like profit taking to you, or?
It surely is profit taking, Paul, but also my sense is that with any new token, the amount of liquidity in that token is limited, right? Because there are probably some people who run the project and own the project, they're holding on for the long run. There are some who came in when they saw this price movement, right, and they quickly jumped in, and then you're right, price. They wanted to make some profit, so they sold some, right? And so, because the liquidity pool is small, I think it's not unusual to see the price go up and down quite rapidly, right? And so what I think is it's likely to happen again. Unfortunately, it'll keep going up. I have a feeling that if the trend continues broadly and the market remains bullish, I do feel that RUNE will continue to see its upward trajectory and will continue to stay above the EMA 20. But you will keep seeing these pullbacks from time to time as it keeps seeing new all-time highs, because again, the liquidity will be limited. So even if 3 guys who have bought into it during the run say, hey, now time to make some money because I've already doubled my value, well, you'll see the price correct back, right? And then new people will enter in. So that's what's going to happen.
No, and definitely, the analysis of these earlier stage tokens or with fewer holders, as mentioned, is a lot different to some of the larger assets and those other alternatives like BNB. We've
Absolutely.
also got a question on Phantom as well, which we're jumping to next.
Perfect.
And very similar. Do we see Phantom going up, or is it going to retrace some more for us? So let's look at the charts.
Yeah, definitely. Let's look at Phantom. There's just one comment I want to make about RUNE before we go to Phantom.
Sure.
Again, this is not investment advice, so I'm going to say that loud and clear again. But for anyone who's trying to get into RUNE and buy today, I would say hold on a little bit. And the reason being that it seems to be that stage where it's trying to find its next price point. It has seen a big red candle. And so I think you could assume that it might correct a little bit more and maybe retest the EMA 20. It's possible. So at least see for some confirmation, right? See for at least a little bit of green coming back up. Or if you see a very clear confirmation like a bullish engulfing or something, then of course there's no doubts on it. But wait for at least an inkling of a green, if you may, before this price maybe retests EMA 20, and then you can enter in. Okay, and then let's get back to, or rather get to FTM. Oh wow, look at this. So this is a fascinating chart. So I hadn't looked at it this morning, okay, and I'm just looking at it right now fresh, but I see 2-3 things here which are just catching my attention right away. It's kind of very fascinating. One is, of course, this massive parabolic bull run of very large green candles over the last few days. No doubts that it's just seen some renewed interest.
Very similar shape to what we saw in March, right? The candles are almost identical.
Correct, exactly. And that's the second part of the puzzle, that we did see this massive upsurge in sort of late Feb, March type of time zone. And then we sort of saw price in a range bound territory, right? So if give me 1 minute, I'm going to draw a couple of lines here because this is super interesting. I just take this and let's just say this is one. Okay, this is a fair one. This has been tested a few times. And I draw another one here. Right, this has been tested a few times also. It's amazing that the price has kind of stayed within this range, and that's whatever 31 cents to 54 cents roughly, right? So I would say like 30 to 55 cents. Okay, I'm just kind of rounding that off.
Yeah.
Right, that's where it's been for the most part, right? So it's been between 30 to 50 cents, and then of course we've seen these big spikes up. Yeah, this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting. So there are two other things I would add to it. I'm trying to figure out what a trader should do. One is, of course, overall the trend is still positive, so it's playing with the market. Okay, so it's staying with the market. You can see that it stayed above EMA 20 for the most part, and then definitely has respected EMA 50 for the most part, barring the small sort of false breakout downwards, or rather a very short period breakout from that EMA 50 range. Which essentially at least tells me from just a filtering standpoint that it's still trending positive and trending upwards. So yes, you are probably going to see an upward momentum. Having said that, though, the last movement where it sharply corrected and was range bound makes me wonder whether we should wait a little bit for this price to find its new stable range. We already see a red emerging, so there's a little bit of profit taking going on at this price point of 84 cents. And so I think you might want to see at least a couple of more candles, for the question that is out there, right? Where do you see Phantom going up or retrace first? I would say I probably see it retracing first a little bit. Question is, how much will it retrace, right? So maybe we can use some fib mapping here and see if it's been respecting some of the fib levels. So let's maybe just plot that.
Yeah, and if it was going to retrace, which fib level, would we see it kind of going to there? So
right. So I'm just saying, again, sort of going back to that good old saying that if history doesn't repeat, at least it rhymes. So let's see that what the rhyme tells us. So in the first surge, it went all the way up to about 87 cents, and from there it started retracing back, and this point was very sharp fib retracement. In fact, kind of matches with this fib level. It's amazing. It's a 0.786 fib, so this is a very sharp retracement.
30 cents there. Yeah,
exactly, at that 30 cents. So the 87 to 30 cents is a 0.78 retracement. So see, we hadn't even looked at it, but when we drew the lines, it's amazing that a fib is really telling a story here. And then it went back up to about 50% retracement level, right? So this is a 50%. This is phenomenal. In some sense, it seems like the traders in the FTM world are looking at fib all day long to trade, right? So it's kind of, it's amazing, right? So it has gone from 0.78 to 50, like that's the level it's trying to find something. And then it went back up, and this all-time high is very close to the last all-time high, right? So, and in fact, it couldn't even go as far up, right? There was selling pressure, and let's draw it here.
Yeah, so if it does take the all-time high, would that be a potential signal for retracement, or could it already retrace from where it is at kind of 84 cents?
I think it's already seeing pressure. I feel like there's a strong resistance in this zone around the 85 plus level. This is 84,201. So I think the moment it reaches the 0.85 cents level, it looks like there's a strong resistance there. It's not able to break that out comfortably for at least at this point in time, and it has seen the price correct back again. I would say wait till 0.236 at least. This is what I would say. I would say wait till here. Okay, to answer the question more precisely, wait till at least here and let the story unfold. Wait till the 0.70 mark and see how the price corrects. And if the price corrects even further, well, then wait till the next fib level, right? Like either the 0.382 or the 0.5, and kind of play it with the fib levels. I think that's a very safe way to understand this price action here.
Great. All right, we've got to keep moving through the show there, but already some great questions there. And now we're going to jump into Solana.
Yeah, let's do that. So let's move to Solana. Okay. Wow, another one, right? Another one that's rapidly sort of
Yeah,
going this bull run.
I think it's lending them a lot of credence as a alt. I mean, obviously, we discussed previously Solana that it had more of that VC type of funding into there. The holders are potentially less of a community basis of holders compared to, say, RUNE or FTM. But yeah, it's interesting to see that there's still so much more demand for Solana at this time.
Yeah, totally. So Solana also has seen a very sharp movement upwards, right? It's gone more than 3 times, right? So it was hovering around the $12 to $14 range for a little bit, right, through February up until end March, and then it's gone parabolic, and now it's hanging around close enough to $1.50, right? So it has really seen a big upsurge. There are a couple of things to keep in mind when it comes to Solana. Solana has a very strong narrative going. It has the backing of SBF Alameda and the whole sort of FTX network that is also perhaps propelling some of this price action. I would like to see a little bit more of new apps being built on the Solana network. Now there is some going on. There's also a whole Soul Starter stuff which is trying to mimic or redo what BSC achieved with its own IDOs and Cake and other things. I feel like Solana is trying to play that game too with its Soul Starter and a bunch of other sort of IDOs happening on the Solana network. I would say I'd let that play out a little bit, right? And if it plays out strong and we start seeing again the kinds of action that is happening, in the sort of BNB world or the BSC world, then certainly this price action could go much further up, right? Like I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, that we start seeing $100 Solana, right? It's possible. Let's put it that way. I'm not trying to predict yet. I'm just saying it's possible. Okay.
And in the RSI there, it is indicating to us, it is starting to get into that overbought territory, but it's not looking too worrisome, is it?
Yeah, surely. So see, again, going back to what we've discussed a few times, the overbought, oversold needs to be taken with a pinch of salt when the market is trending so strongly, either upwards or downwards. In this case, it's upwards. What it does tell you is maybe it tells you a little bit about your entry point, right? It just gives you a little hint or a little indication of, hey, is it the right time to enter in a trade? Certainly it's overbought, right? And it's been in this overbought range multiple times and has stayed there for long periods of time as well, right? For example, here it's kind of funny. The overbought became irrelevant because it was overbought starting 28th of March and kind of remained overbought till 15th of April. So it didn't deter any of the buyers, right? People kept on buying and kept on buying. I have a feeling that there might be a little bit of that, just kind of overall euphoria, overall enthusiasm that might keep buyer interest for a bit, unless the market sharply corrects. I would say from a trader's worldview, keep an eye on this. There is liquidity here, there's action here. Solana may be worth trading. Okay, and I would look at these price points. I don't think it's going to test EMA 20 anytime soon. It could. It has touched EMA 20 a few times, so it very well could. But also for periods, it has just stayed with a wider gap from EMA 20. So I would say there are two ways you could look at it. Look at the last few points here. This is a good price point, 41, roughly in that range. I would say an area of value around this. The other way to look at it is the relative movement. So if you think about it, we've had this big green, then we saw a little bit of pullback, right? A little bit of this correction, and then indifference period, and then another one. So maybe like let this play out a little bit. Look at what the next candle looks like. If it's going into a similar zone, right? If you see somewhat similar pattern like we've seen here, we've seen a little bit here, we saw a bunch here when it starts moving sideways, right? Either it's an accumulation phase or just sort of price discovery phase. You could also find a good entry point there, like a opening day or the turn of the next green, and you could possibly enter in there as well. I would say the one thing that we haven't emphasized so much from a trading standpoint, if you're a discretionary trader, right? If you're not an automated trader and you're discretionary, getting into positions one at a time, given the way the market is right now, do make sure to have a clearly well-defined stop loss. Okay, and what I would suggest, again, this is no investment advice, so do your own research. But if I were to enter a trade in this, I would do a couple of things. Firstly, I would wait for some confirmation, and secondly, I would give it plenty of breathing room, right? So I would give, this is about $5 of ATR, 14-day RMA. So I would definitely give it at least a couple of ATRs, if not more, which means $10 of breathing room. Which in other words means if I'm going to enter a trade right here today, which is say $46, my stop loss should be at least $10 of breathing room there. So, assuming all the trend upwards, I'm saying it should at least be somewhere here, right? Like in this range, somewhere here,
Sure.
nowhere less than that, right? That gives us enough room because that also has its, the sort of EMA 20, the line that it respects. And then if it also spikes down, like we saw this one, right? One of the long wicks, which could just, liquidate your position or get you into loss territory. And when I say liquidate your position, if you were really playing in, sort of a derivative on Solana, make sure that you have this much breathing room, right? So if you have $10 breathing room and you can make it like a chandelier stop, you can keep it tracing as the price moves, then, that's a good thing. You would be safe there. That's what I would say. Let me actually plot the chandelier, for people who may want to and may be interested in that. I'm sure there is one.
Yeah, that's a indicator we haven't looked at so much yet.
So, okay, I gotta get rid of one. Chandelier stop. Okay, let's put chandelier stop. And what happened to it?
Yeah, it's there at 36. No?
I don't know. Oh, okay, it did.
Yeah,
so
it's on the chart. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. ATR period 22 days. Fine. I'll set it to 14 days. That's what we're mapping. Okay, it's taking 3 days. Look back also. Well, let's go look back also around 14 days. Okay. 2 weeks worth. That's plenty for this. So here it is, right? So what this one is doing really is it's taking the the look back period, the last 14 days really, and it's creating the stop, which is a few ATRs away, right? So in this particular case, it's doing a 3 ATR multiplier to it, right? So it takes the ATR period of 14 days and it says my breathing room should be 3 ATRs from where the price is. So therefore, you see this kind of tracing as the price moves, right? So the price is moving up and the chandelier is sort of tracing the price movement. So yeah, even in the chandelier is stop is saying about $34 or so is where you should set your stop loss. So this is something that I would highly recommend, and keep watching the price and make sure you have enough breathing room so you don't get on the wrong side of the trade.
Great. All right. Yeah, we're coming up to almost an hour there, so I know it's been quite in depth going through each of those. One of the things we did want to mention is we do have another series, which is our crypto chats, and that's going to be coming up just a little bit under 24 hours from now. We'll be talking with Arthur Falls, who's obviously, one of the early podcasters in this space, and somebody who no doubt has a lot of stories to share. So also, we want to make sure you guys don't miss out, and obviously we want you to be part of the conversation. So either, subscribe to our newsletter on Substack or follow us on Twitter, and we'll keep, putting out great content. Hopefully you learn something, as we keep saying this is just educational, and that really is the goal from all these series. So that's been really fun session again there, Shanky. Appreciate all of the insights, and looking forward to chatting to Arthur tomorrow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the OGs bring in an interesting perspective from the years that they've seen the community evolve, the crypto verse sort of become different every few years. So looking forward to that. And very, very excited again. I think we've been having these chartered sessions, and it's good for us also to reflect between the two of us. And hopefully our listeners are also enjoying this and getting something out of it. One more piece I want to mention is in the next few newsletters, we had promised we'll bring out an exhaustive analysis on BTC valuation models. So we'll try and ship that soon.
Right.
And then the next version, perhaps, it seems like because there is so many eyes on this sort of alternative side chains and AMMs, and what's happening with these challengers. Maybe we'll focus on some topics from there. Perhaps maybe the serious alts, if you may, might be an interesting topic for the following newsletter, which again we'll try and ship over the next few days. So yeah, do like, subscribe for sure. Like, subscribe, and you won't miss a thing. You won't miss the shows. You won't miss the newsletter.
Yep, and also as promised, we'll put out some polls on our Twitter account in the coming hours and reflect on a few things there. So yeah, let's keep the conversation going, and otherwise we'll see you next time.
Yep, exactly. Stay strong, keep going elliptic.
Cool. See ya.
See ya.